Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Scott Burgmeyer joining us. Scott is the founder and CEO of BecomeMore Group, a business transformation and optimization consultancy based in West Des Moines, Iowa. Scott is also the co-author of Chief Optimization Officer, Shattering the Status Quo. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite topics. Whether you call it optimization or continuous improvement, it is one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today is I spent a lot of time in Iowa. You're in Iowa today, and so we've got the Iowa connection going.
Yes.
I have to ask, are you a Hawkeye fan or a Cyclones fan?
I did grow up as a Hawkeye fan. Our oldest did go to Iowa State, but that did not change my perspective.
All right. Excellent to be speaking with a fellow Hawkeye. Scott, before we get started, I ask all my guests this question. Please give us the elevator pitch version of your story.
Yeah, my story is a little weird, but the short elevator speech is I'm a chemist by training who got into business, who learned about quality and process improvement, and also kind of morphed into kind of leadership and people development, and then had the opportunity to have my own company and grow my own company, and love working with organizations to see how can they level up and, no pun intended, become more.
Nice. I like the you start as a chemist and then you wind your way into the world of transformation and continuous improvement, optimization. I think it's a lovely message for younger folks who are just coming out of college. Maybe they have a degree in chemistry. They don't know what they're going to be doing with their lives, and the answer is, it's pretty much an open highway for you. So you can do a lot of different things with a chemistry background.
Yeah, it really is being that lifelong learner to say, what could I do? And that sounds interesting, and explore.
Right.
It's an opportunity to explore.
Yeah, you're not trapped in your degree path necessarily. Scott, if you had to pick one event in your life that really put rocket boosters under your career trajectory, what would that be?
I think it really was, I had an employer that was willing to invest in an executive coach for me. And it was really having that external person who wasn't my boss, giving me the tough love and telling me the truth about, hey, these are the things that are really, really great about you. And these are the things that maybe aren't so great that you may want to work on if you really want to achieve the things you say you want to achieve.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they push back on, they think getting an executive coach is somehow, some sort of punishment. And I think it's absolutely the opposite. It is a time for awakening and growth if your mind will allow it to be that. And it sounds like you took advantage of that assignment.
Yeah, and it really becomes, if you're looking for a coach or getting a coach, you're really going to get out of it what you put into it.
Yep.
The coach can't do the work for you.
Yep. So, Scott, let's start with the basics of continuous improvement. So we'll start with continuous improvement first, and then we're going to wind our way more to the transformation side of things. In your assessment, what are the essential ingredients for any successful continuous improvement journey?
Yeah, I would tell you it's probably 3 or 4 things. One is figure out what is the model you want to use. And people will say, oh, it's Six Sigma. No, it's Lean. No, it's Lean Six. Like, just pick one. Pick one that you're like, this makes sense to us. I can live with this. It's not too rigid and it's rigid enough. I kind of think of it as Goldilocks. It needs to be just right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, right, so that's one ingredient. Second ingredient is like you have to have people and you have to invest in people so that they can learn it, make it part of how they work, how they operate, build in some expectations and some recognition around that. And then really, I think the third thing is how do you integrate it in what you do? How do you make it part of, it's not extra work, it's how we work.
Yeah. Those three ingredients. I love that you talked about the people side of the equation. One of my favorite books is The People Side of Lean Thinking by Robert Brown. It's probably got to be 20 years old. 20-year-old book by now, but my gosh, I had a colleague come into my office with that book all earmarked and tagged and with all these Post-it notes in it, and said, "Andy, you really got to read this." And that's what turned me on to continuous improvement, was this connection to the people side. Would you agree?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And a lot of times we'll talk about it as, are you doing it to them or are you doing it with them? And there's a huge element of the more I can bring them along and on the ride, on the journey, the more long-term successful you'll be. Now, the hard part is sometimes, gosh, I could only get 3/4 of the way there. But if I would have done it myself and I would have just said, go do this, we could have got 80% there. I left 5% on the table. Yeah, you may have left 5% of the table in that moment, but the reality is doing it with them, you're probably going to gain 105% because a few of those people are like, hey, this is cool. I want to do this. And they're going to start doing it on their own without waiting for you.
Right. Yeah, that's really where the power comes, where they go, wow, yeah, these tools are really working for us.
Yes.
Let's go and make it their own. So, the flip side of this equation, I've had personally in my career, I have had 2 continuous improvement journeys fail. What's the most critical tactical error that leaders make that leads to the failure of a continuous improvement journey?
Yeah. Again, I think there's a couple key ones. I think one of them is, of course, you didn't bring the leadership team along. So kind of where are you in the hierarchy? All organizations have some sort of hierarchy. Did you really bring that top leadership team along? I think there is an element of, was it too rigid? Was it too technical? Because that can be a challenge. I think really the number one is people. I haven't taken the time to think about how will this be different for people? And have I taken the time to really do that and lead the change along the way? Or did we say, hey, we've made it this cool program and we're doing a lean program or a Six Sigma program? That makes me like kind of shudder a little bit, because I think, oh, it's a program, which means it's temporary.
Right.
Cool.
Right. Yeah, it is a way of working. And, your first point on failure, which is the rigidity and really a continuous improvement practice can have a really broad scope. You bring in all of this foreign language. It confuses the crap out of everybody. It is a different way of working. And the immediate response is pushback, pushback, pushback. This too shall pass. So, Scott, by definition, continuous improvement means change. What role does change management play in the journey? And do you have to adopt a formal change management practice as well, or can you weave the two together?
I do believe you can weave the two together. I think you don't have to have a formal change management process. And if you don't, it's a little weird. That's a great question, because there's a part of me that says, well, if you don't have a formal change management process, you probably won't experience the level of change you might desire. And if you have a formal change management process, it might be too formal and too, like, people be like, oh, well. And I think it really is more about, I think a lot of organizations say, we want to change. And I actually believe they're identifying the right change many times. What they're not doing is mapping the impact of that change well enough to understand what's the impact to the people and to our processes and to our organization. And they underestimate the lift.
Yeah.
And they go at it hard. And they have then said, well, we made this decision, we must. And sometimes it's, I'm not considering something I missed, or I haven't understood that, oh, that is really going to shift this. And I've underestimated that. Yeah. And then we give up. And I think the last part is we get into that dip. And I've always described it as, it's what you do. If you ever rode a bike, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go downhill and then I got to go uphill. What am I doing on the downhill? Well, I'm going. And when I get towards the bottom of that hill, like, I'm going to pedal a little extra harder so I get a little extra speed so I go up that hill.
Yep.
It's that when you're in that dip, sometimes it's like, oh, this is too hard. Maybe this change isn't worth it. And it's like, wait, that's probably the moment you need to push on the accelerator.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a moment you need to push on the accelerator and pedal harder. It's probably also the moment where a little bit of agility, because this is the balancing act to talk about today, is this balancing act between the rigidity of continuous improvement practice and the agility that you really have to have because of the change element, because not everybody is going to come along with you at the same rate. Everybody's got their own set of change management curves, right?
Yes.
So you've got to recognize that, and speeding up, slowing down, getting a sense of the tempo of the organization versus, damn it, we've said we're going to do this, and so therefore we're going to do it come hell or high water. That I think is what you're saying. Yeah. Avoid.
Yeah. And as leaders, if we're really leading change, it is about recognizing where is that individual on the change curve right now.
Yep.
And we'll all be in different places at different times. And then, am I adapting how I'm interacting with that person? Am I using the right methodology to support them to move forward down the change curve and to minimize the emotional response? We all have an emotional response to change.
Yep.
And it can be joy, and it can be dread, and it can be everything in between. And our role as a leader is, how do we minimize that and support them down the curve? And then I do think the other part of change failure is, the research really says on the other side, even if you do change, if you lead the change really, really well, 5 to 10% will not be able to make it on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
They can't accept it. They don't like the change. They're not aligned, whatever. And some will self-select out. And those who don't self-select out, are you strong enough as a leader to say, you're not aligning and I need you to align? And if they then don't, are you willing to make the call?
Yeah. The last thing that you want are a bunch of folks who are actively pushing, they're actively disengaged. They're actively working against the aims of the business. Scott, we're going to take a really short commercial break, and we'll come back and we'll talk more on the business transformation side of things.
Sounds great.
Excellent. Hey everyone, I'd like to invite you to start your weekend with me on the Saturday Morning Muse podcast. I briefly explore topics that span leadership, business management, education, and personal continuous improvement. Subscribe to the Saturday Morning Muse podcast on your favorite podcast streaming app, or visit andrewtempty.com for more information. And we're back with Scott Burgmeyer talking about one of my favorite subjects, continuous improvement and business transformation. Scott, what makes a business transformation different from a continuous improvement journey? And as you're talking about that, let's recognize that most business transformations fail. And why is that the case?
Yeah, I almost would differentiate the kind of the continuous improvement journey. I do believe is an essential part of a business transformation, like ingraining that in and building that, because it's a little weird to think about when you say we need to transform our business. Well, if you were really doing continuous improvement, you should never have to transform your business because you're always on the journey of moving towards where you need to be.
Right.
And that's a little tongue in cheek, I know. I think when you think about business transformation, what we see many times is organizations say, I want to get to that point over there. And they're not putting, they're thinking of it like, oh, I need to restructure and we're going to do a reorg. And they're not aligning their reorg. And I actually think reorg is it's like a 4-letter word, but I guess it's a 5-letter word.
It is a 4-letter word for sure.
I would talk about it as we're going to do purposeful organizational design, targeted at where we want to be. And painting that picture of the future to say, then how do we need to structure and organize ourselves to allow us to realize that future? And many times we'll say, well, we're just going to org design and we're just going to do what everybody else does. Versus saying, no, what roles do I need? And having that leader say, okay, around my table, who are the people I'm going to rely on for counsel that are going to guide us to that future place? Which may mean, you know what? In some cases, it might be like, oh, I've always had a chief strategy officer. I must need a chief strategy officer. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. How is that chief strategy officer going to be counsel to you and the rest of the team to allow you to reach your goal and to start to right size that team? And then the second part is, are they one team? So that whole first team concept, that if you're that leadership team, whether it's the executives or senior leadership team or vice president, like whatever you call them, everyone who they say they, that group of people, are they first team? Are they working with each other for the organization first? Then are they focused on their team or their functional part of the business? And many times they get distracted by their team, their function in the business, versus saying what's the right decision for the business.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're spot on in terms of the senior executive team. Boy, a business transformation, a big heavy lift. We want to go over there. We know that we've got a lot of work to do to get there. That a senior team that is going to be selfless first, focusing on the business objectives, and then focused on their team. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's the other way around. You get a lot of head nodding. Oh yeah, we want to go over there. But then when it comes to their team and the impact on their team, it's always, well, everything's fine in here. We're not going to change. We don't need to be part of this, or we're not going to get involved. This is everybody else's problem, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the last research I read was, a leadership team, senior leadership team, is only about 70 to 75%, 60, something like that. Call it 3/4 because I just can't remember the exact number, aligned on the strategy, which means a quarter of them, 25%, are thinking this isn't the right strategy. We shouldn't do it. I don't agree. and they may not be actively working against, but they are not actively supporting it.
Yeah. That's where things fall apart.
Yes.
Now, I want to make sure that we hit the topic of strategic planning. I looked at your website before the show, and you talk about business optimization and the role of strategic, all the strategic planning work. Leadership teams typically do a lot of heavy lifting on strategic purpose, strategic planning, but then for some reason it gets stuffed in somebody's desk drawer somewhere, never to see the light of day because the day-to-day just kind of swallows the whole thing up. How do you prevent that from happening?
Yeah, it's strategic planning. Every time we talk strategic planning, I think about the Christmas song. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It is my absolute favorite thing to do with organizations.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I love to dream big and I love to hear about what are they thinking. Like that is, for me, it's just so much fun.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is we get really good at strategic planning. We are really terrible at strategic execution. And we talk about it in this nebulous strategic planning instead of stepping back. And it's a little bit weird to even say out loud, but it's really saying, what is the strategic process? And there are phases. I need to do a little dreaming about what is that big thing? And I want to think really, really big. What could we be? Where should we go? Okay, now I'm going to put that in. Okay, what's the bite-sized chunk I'm going to do in whatever time horizon I'm looking at? Is it a year? Is it 3 years? Whatever that is you're doing. You then have to have some disciplined cadence of saying, here are the initiatives or the focus things we're going to do for this next time period. And what is my check-in process to see how is it going? And how have you built your process and your systems around that to say, okay, we're going to do the planning at this time. Like I will tell you that one of the top things I see organizations do is they say, okay, we've set our budget and then we're going to go do strategic planning. And then we're going to say, crap, I can't do that because I didn't budget for it. Well, maybe we should change the order a little bit and let's do strategic planning so that it can inform what budget do we need. And now that may say, oh, we can't afford to do a couple of those things. Great, we'll right size it. That's fine. I get it. I would love to drive a Lamborghini. That's really not probably the money I'm going to spend in the near or future, or maybe any time in my lifetime, right? That's not something my wife and I would maybe align on from a strategy perspective. The really then is, what is your cadence of check-in? And I would tell you, it's at least every month. You are sitting down either as a team or with those individuals leading those initiatives, and you're saying, how is it going? And what I would cross my fingers that you're doing is when they say, oh, it's going great, everything is fine. There's some secondary or third question like, great, next time we have our one-on-one next Tuesday, I'd love to see what you're working on. Or how do you know it's going well? Our outcome was to improve this 10%. How much have you improved it so far? I think many times, we do the check-in and people say, oh yeah, it's great, it's fine. And then at the end of the time, you're like, wah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to take the strategic and turn it into the tactical, and then have that talk back to the strategic. So you have this, instead of a one-way street from the strategic to the tactical, and then the message disperses and gets lost. You have to have that feedback, that talk back from the tactical informing the strategic. So you're this nice circle.
Yeah. And I think the other part I think I see is, if you think about a strategy, and we're going to go down this path, you're kind of doing three things. You're going to build something. Now that may be a process, that may be a product, that might be whatever that is. You're then going to start to use it or have people use it or start to get it out there. And then the third thing is you're going to reap the benefits of that, right? You're going to have some kind of impact of that. Sometimes people say, hey, let's do that all in this short window of time. And in my experience, getting all three in one time period, in 1 year, is rare. And sometimes it's like, maybe this year, all we're going to do is build it.
Mm-hmm.
And then next year, we're going to get it out there. And maybe by the middle of the year, we're going to start reaping some benefit. But the real benefit is going to come in that third year. And I think sometimes we don't have the patience to say, I want to ride that curve because I want that immediate gratification right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really hard to do that. And I think we lose sight of that. And we say, oh, we're not getting that impact that we want. Let's change. And you get that kind of strategic whiplash, or we set it aside saying, oh, this isn't working.
Right. Yep. It finds its way into that desk drawer, never to be seen again.
Yes.
So Scott, tell us a little bit more about Chief Optimization Officer. What haven't we talked about today that you want to be sure our listeners take away from that work?
Yeah. My business partner, Tammy, and I, when we, first kind of had this idea and thought, what we really realized was most organizations want to improve and want to perform well. And there are many, many reasons why they don't. And what we recognized was there's really no one person who is in charge of that. And yeah, there may be different roles, whether that's a chief strategy officer or maybe it's this, the CEO, but each of them also get stuck in their functional work that they need to do. And what we are suggesting is there is a role that sits at the leadership team, at that executive level, and their role is to push the organization and to really look at it holistically and not in a way that's like too focused on operations and not enough on people, or too focused on people and not enough on operations. And yes, I may be stereotyping a little bit, but I think if you've worked in an organization or you've worked with a leadership team, you do start to see those biases of their functional area. And I think it's super natural. I've been there. I have biases, absolutely. And so the thinking is this role really is their biases about how do we get to really reaching our potential and really cutting through the BS about all the reasons, oh, we can't because of this or that. Like their whole role is to push the organization.
Right.
And so, we were talking right before the show. We're just implementing number 13 and 14 of organizations we've worked with who've kind of chosen to go down that path. And, I would say our biggest success story is they have had they've doubled in size with number of people. They've went from 10% turnover to 2% turnover. And they have increased kind of, if you think about their size and doubling, they've increased their bottom line, their profitability by 25%. I mean, that's pretty significant. Now, again, is it all magically because of that one person? No, right? No. There's other things they did. It really is. They did the purposeful org design. They did all these things, and they have this kind of sustainability. How are we growing and getting better each year?
Yeah. Well, thank you for introducing us to the concept of the Chief Optimization Officer. Yeah. I think it's something really cool for folks to dig in more on. Before we get to our lightning round questions, where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, the quickest and easiest is through our website at BecomeMoreGP.com, or they can email directly at BecomeMoreGP.com. LinkedIn, You can LinkedIn stalk me if you'd like.
Sure. All right. So, Scott, I have a few lightning round questions for you, if that's all right.
Sounds great.
All right. Number one, you just won $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
I would go American Cancer Society.
Yes. Great cause. Second question, if you had access to a rudimentary time machine and could send a short message to an earlier version of Scott Burgmeyer, what's the message and what previous version of yourself do you choose to send it to?
I would send it to 27-year-old me. And I would hopefully I can say two things. Go get a coach right now. And second would be go be a consultant sooner.
Nice. Yeah. A lot of folks want to send messages to like the 14-year-old version of themselves. And unfortunately, the 14-year-old version of yourself won't listen to the message that you're sending back.
Yes.
With the 27-year-old version of yourself, I think you have a fighting chance there.
I'd like to think so. But you never know.
Yeah. Scott, we're all, last question, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Yeah. It is a growth, and it's a little bit of a shameless plug, so you can yell at me if we have to re-record this, totally fine. We actually have a new book coming out at the end of this month, and so we've been on a research journey the last 5 years, so that has been quite amazing to learn about a little bit of the science of the brain, a little bit of what that does to hold us back, and, what are tactics to kind of get ahead of that. And so, our new book is called Think, The Road Less Traveled. And it really is about what is stopping people from thinking.
Yeah, all of those cognitive biases, all that calcification, right? I had the most interesting direct message a couple of years ago over LinkedIn. I'd done a post about cognitive bias, and this gentleman wrote, and he said, "I can't believe you're talking about that. I'm not biased at all." Like, well, that is bias in and of itself. I believe it's called naive cynicism or something like that. To not have bias is in and of itself bias. So
yes.
All right, Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, I had a great time, Andy. Thank you for having me.
All right. My name is Andy Tempty. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, and maybe a family member or two. The show is produced by Nicholas Tempty. We'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.